Now, the person who's got the challenging job of summarizing the science and the debates and the policy discussions that have been going on over the last 3 days is Sybil Seitzinger, Executive Director of the International Geosphere-Biosphere Program. And she's going to now give us her highlights, the things that have struck her in summarizing the events of the last 3 days. Sybil, over to you.
Thank you, Nisha. It's great to be here. It's great to see all these wonderful faces in the audience. This has been an exceptional week. And we have an exceptional year before us, as we've heard. We live in exceptional times. Humanity, as we've heard, has changed the planet at unprecedented levels. We now call this the Anthropocene. As Nisha said, I'm charged with giving you some highlights of the last 3 days. Just a few nuggets. I'm going to start by talking about some of the pressures on the planet and how some examples of using our new knowledge moving towards solutions. So the nature of the challenge really is defined by the Anthropocene that we have produced. As we know, we have over 7 billion people on the planet. Over half of those people live in urban areas. The population of the planet is on a trajectory to increase by 2 to 3 billion. It indicates that over the next 40 years, we're going to have to produce or to build cities of about 1 million people every week in order for those people to have places to live, because most of that increase in population will be living in urban areas, an astounding challenge in itself. Many of our cities, in particular those in Asia and Africa, are having unprecedented levels of atmospheric pollution, leading to severe consequences for human health. We're changing the landscape dramatically to produce enough food to feed the people on the planet, as well as for their other needs. Freshwater resources are being depleted due to not only irrigation, but also human consumption and other needs. And we're modifying rivers around the world in many ways, including by building major dams for energy, as well as for irrigation. If we could have the video, I'm going to show you a video of the construction of major dams starting in now we're up to 1870s. Every red dot is a new dam being built. I want you to watch the acceleration as we move into the 1950s and beyond. The acceleration of the human enterprise, just one example of that. Of course, this is important for energy production, but it also is markedly decreasing the transport of sediments to our coastal zones and delta regions, as well as modifying the ecosystems in these rivers. And of course, also trying to cope with extreme events. How are our ecosystems responding to these many pressures? Well, there are many surprises. In fact, they're seeing now that some species, not all, but some species, in fact, are evolving much faster than people ever thought, on the order of years instead of on the order of millions of years. And what are the implications of this for our ecosystems? And if that wasn't enough pressure on the planet, as we know, we're also going towards climate change. This shows the record of temperature over the last approximately 2,000 years, staying within a reasonably narrow or relatively narrow range, but it also shows us the increase, that red line at the end of where we're going now. And this shows the IPCC projections under sort of a business as usual scenario. This is where we are now, but actually, even if we stopped all the CO2 emissions that we are producing today, all of it, we would still have increased climate or increased warming because of the long response time of the Earth system. And as we know, we don't want to be up higher on that red line. As Bob Watson told us at the beginning of this meeting, we must act, and we must act now. In addition to the CO2 increase in the atmosphere leading to climate change, it also is affecting our oceans, resulting in ocean acidification. And the oceans are now acidifying at a speed and a level that has not been experienced by marine organisms for 60 to 300 million years. We need to understand what the implications of this for our ocean ecosystems, but most importantly, we need to decrease the CO2 in the atmosphere. Our science is really trying to address and help inform decision makers. And this shows some of the improvements in the regional climate models in terms of predicting precipitation in the Indian monsoon area. The top left, you see the measured precipitation and the pattern of that, spatial and the intensity of it. And on the right-hand side, you see the lower resolution models results, 1 degree latitude by 1 degree longitude. And you see there's not a very good correspondence there. Not truly helpful for the decision makers. However, with the higher resolution models now that are coming online, this one at a 1/4 degree latitude by longitude, we see now a much better correspondence between the observed precipitation, both intensity and or amount and spatial distribution, with the model predictions now. So very important, the level in this of information that decision makers need for investment, for building infrastructure, farmers need for agriculture, a wide range of user needs. We need to be able to communicate better, too, to the public and to policymakers. They hear, of course, that carbon dioxide is increasing in the atmosphere, temperature is increasing, but some years it goes up, the next year it goes down a little bit. Arctic sea ice is decreasing, sea level is increasing, but again, there's year-to-year variation. How can we communicate to the public the general trends in which direction we're going? Well, we've created a simple climate index which takes sort of the average change in these 4 parameters. We've calculated it beginning in 1980 up through 2011 now, and as you can see, it's indicating that we're continuing to move towards a warmer climate, considering these 4 major factors. But as the Secretary General of the UN has just told us, and as we've heard from Mark and Lydia and Lynn, there are multiple challenges before us. Many of them are interconnected, and we need to look for interconnected solutions. So I want to give you just a couple of examples from the conference of some of the interconnected solutions to address some interconnected problems or multiple problems. And the first one I'm going to talk about relates to air quality and climate. And 2 reports that have come out recently looking at what are some opportunities for win-win situations here. Let me just tell you a couple of things to walk you through this. Okay, so we know that CO2 is increasing. We know we need to have ambitious reductions in CO2 to decrease the climate change. At the same time, methane is also a greenhouse gas, okay, contributing to warming, but methane also has human health implications in that it's a precursor of ground-level ozone, human health. It also affects crop production, plant production. So we need to reduce methane. In addition, black carbon, soot from primarily combustion of biomass in much of the developing world used for cooking and heating and other uses. We also need to reduce black carbon because it also contributes to warming and has human health impacts. So in these studies, they've looked at a suite of measures that would reduce black carbon, methane, and consequently ground-level ozone, as well as ambitious reductions for CO2. And together, these could actually keep us within the 2 degree, supposedly keep us within the 2 degree target of warming, as well as have important implications for human health and food security. Here we see the impacts of those measures on premature deaths that could be avoided. And you can see that in India, China, and many countries, it could have significant benefits on human health. Also, it impacts crop production in terms of putting these measures together can increase crop production in numerous areas in the world. Again, China, India, here we have the United States, Pakistan, a number of areas. So by combining strategic measures for targeting them, using the science, connecting that to decisions, we can have multiple benefits. One more example I'll use here before closing, again with the food production. As we know, we're going to have to decrease food availability in the next 40 years or so to supply the nutritional, caloric value, caloric needs of the increasing population and their increasing nutritional needs. How are we going to do that? We've heard had great sessions at this conference looking at what some of the options and opportunities for doing that. We need to reduce the yield gap, okay? We need to reduce waste, and we need to, especially in the developed world, modify diet, because the livestock that is primarily in the developed world grain-fed is taking that grain out of for direct human consumption. I just want to note that you've probably all noticed at this conference we've made a major effort to have low meat consumption. And we've also made an effort to reduce waste by having bagged lunches instead of big buffets. And we've had a nitrogen calculator here. And Ali did a calculation these last few days and has estimated that we've actually reduced our nitrogen footprint by the dietary choices that we've given you by about 30% over what it would have been if you had sort of a normal conference food choice. So we've also significantly reduced waste. So just a little sideline to some of the things going on here. But of course, it's not just increasing food availability that we need to think about, but we have to look at the other interconnected issues. We need to continue to improve livelihoods. That really takes coming together between the natural and social sciences, as do many of these solutions. And we have to be paying very careful attention, of course, to the environment. As we're increasing intensity of agriculture in certain areas, we need to be sure that we're not increasing the nutrient loss from these fields and increasing coastal eutrophication, decreasing water quality. We need to be sure that we're making sure that those ecosystems, which are important carbon sinks, remain as those important carbon sinks. So it's going to take a lot of work, a lot of action at local scales, which we've heard a lot about in this conference, as well as at larger scales, regional and global scales. In fact, all of these issues require action across a range of scales. So, just as my last remarks, I wanted to say that we've heard from many different people. We've heard from the Secretary General. We've heard from a number of people that we need to increase dialogue. When Yves Deboer earlier in the week was asked what was the thing we needed to do most immediately, he answered we need to change the dialogue, increase the dialogue. That's one of the things we've tried to incorporate into this conference, not only by bringing very many different perspectives to this conference, not only the natural and social sciences, but business, policy, the media, very important here. Coming together to learn together, to exchange views, and try and chart a way forward together and understand each other's perspectives, as the Secretary General of the UN told us this morning as well. We've had a great participatory sessions. I hope a number of you or most of you have participated in them and enjoyed them, but we need to go beyond that. We need to look for additional mechanisms, as we've heard this morning, moving forward to increase this dialogue, to increase the dialogue between the science, the decision makers, the media, which is very important communicating the messages out there. We need new mechanisms for doing that, new platforms for doing that. And, you know, I just want to put one thing on the table that, you know, the developing climate services can be a very important component of transferring and communicating knowledge and information to decision makers. I think we maybe should think about, are we actually ready? Do we need to think about sustainability services in addition to climate services. So with that, I'll leave you and finish this talk, and I hope you have a great rest of the day. We have a lot of exciting sessions still to come.
You're not going to leave us just yet, Sybil.
Oh, yes.
I want to ask you something.
The question coming in from
No, this isn't a question from the audience. This is a question from me.
Yeah.
Personally, what would be your top takeaway from the last few days?
You know, actually, the moment that meant the most to me, and this is kind of an emotional moment, was when I asked one of the young participants in this conference, somebody who's a postdoc right now, whether she was enjoying the conference, whether this was, good for her. And she said, this is what I have been looking for. This is what I want. I want to be in an arena where there are people coming together from the science, from the business community, looking at the economics, looking at the political decisions. This is what I want. So that's what, to me, is exciting about this conference. The young, early career scientists are here, and everyone early career that's here, that is going to carry these messages forward.
Fantastic. Sybil, thank you so much for joining us. Oh, by the way, there were great graphs. I really like the graph. People who say graphs are boring, they clearly never came to Planet Under Pressure.
Thank you.
Thanks a lot.